Our focus today, Prof, is to digest the 2024 budget statements as laid in Parliament uh, by the Finance Minister yesterday. This may well be his last final full year budget presentation. As you all know, there will be an opportunity for him, though, to present a mid-year budget. But in terms of a full year budget review, he may not have the opportunity to do that again. There's a convention, though, that in November he may present a 3 month budget for the previous, for the incoming government, so that the incoming government will in March present a full year budget of what it intends to do. And we are assuming that, having been a finance minister for 8 years, we don't see him coming back again. So in our editorial of last week, for instance, we did mention the fact that the budget for 2024 must really count for something. What we have always done, graphic business, is to provide the opportunity or the platform for the discussions of national matters and national discourses. So this is one of such platforms. And as always, our platforms have always been one that has been very credible, and that's our claim to fame. We are the most credible brand in this country, and I want to extend this same to all the things we do, events we do. And that is why we always have the best people joining us for discussions of this nature. So, Prof, once again, welcome. We'll give a few minutes for Ghanaians to join us, because we know that you do have a large following. People want to hear you speak. And so, please, Prof, indulge us more whilst we wait for about 5 minutes to engage some people to come and join
Wonderful.
us.
That's
Yeah.
fine. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
In the meantime, we can have an informal discussions on what do you think the color of the event of the budget. I mean, we don't necessarily have to go through the budget statement now. What have been your initial impressions so far? I mean, taking us through what the figures were and what the figures now. Prof. Hello, Prof.
Hello.
Uh-huh. Yes,
Yeah.
we cannot hear you.
Uh-huh.
So
So
I was
good
saying that
morning.
our initial, we can have some initial discussions on what were your expectations, uh, and that whether your expectations have been fulfilled before we go into the discussion proper.
Okay. Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone.
Yeah.
Uh, Thank me for having me here. I consider this a special privilege, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity. As you rightly said, probably this may be the minister's final, maybe full year budget that he's presenting. As some people will say, he's been on borrowed time all this while, though. It's a constitutional requirement that has been fulfilled, and therefore, we want to say that, yeah, baseline, that's compliance. But before I go into the details, I want to highlight that unlike previous years, typically, once the budget is read in Parliament, we are able to get access to the full budget, and then the appendices. But for this year, I don't know, for one reason or the other, the full budget is not available. I don't know whether you have cited the full budget.
Yes, Prof. I shared a copy with you yesterday.
Yeah, that is the budget highlight that the minister
Highlights,
read.
yes. Okay. Not the full budget, yes, not yet.
Not the full
You're right.
budget. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to put some caveat here that we are limited in our discussions today because the full budget hasn't been made available. As an academic, the reason I'm saying this is that the budget highlight doesn't tell us everything. So the analysis and the discussion we are going to have this morning is subject to certain constraints, right, binding constraints. And for me, you get a much deeper insight into government's own programs, intentions for the year when you look at the appendices, right? Because a lot of data information is buried in the appendix. So sometimes a lot of people don't look at appendices,
That's
but
true.
government tends to hide a lot of things in there. So to the extent that the full budget statement and the economic policy is not available, at least for now, I haven't seen it. I've gone to the Ministry of Finance website to check. It's still the budget highlight that is there. We have certain limitations, but we will still make some inputs or discussions based on the highlight that the minister presented. Yeah,
Okay.
and then also given that the 2024 budget mirrors largely the broad fiscal framework
Yeah.
that will govern this country until 2026, and
Yeah.
maybe 2 years after that, based on the May 17th approved IMF supported program. We have a fair understanding of the direction the economy is going, the country is going, based on the IMF broad framework. And you will see, even from the budget highlight, that when it comes to certain projections, GDP growth and other key projections, they are taken directly from the IMF supported program, and therefore we are able to make some insight. But when it comes to the granular data or details, we are a bit hindered because we don't have the full budget statement to really provide a holistic and objective analysis. So probably, our chief editor, probably when the full budget is made available,
Yes.
we can come back on this
We can
discussion.
come back.
Yes.
You are
Then
right. You're right.
yeah. So for today, we'll give government the benefit of the doubt because we don't have access to all the information that they have.
Yeah. Yes.
So,
Prof, so let's start the ball rolling. It's almost 10 minutes after 8. And welcome to Graphic Business X discussions on the 2024 budget. Prof, so the highlight of the budget was an Nkunim budget. And one is beginning to ask whether we have actually had the Nkunim as we wanted as we speak. Because, so the question I'll ask is this: does the budget provide for fiscal consolidation and growth? My emphasis here is on growth, Prof.
okay, thank you very much. Maybe for the benefit of some of us, so when you say Nkunim in the English version, what would that mean? I have
Victory.
some understanding because I
Yes,
did fancy in
victory.
secondary school, and that was a subject I failed also. Yeah.
Victory. So it will mean victory, yes.
Victory. Okay, all right. So that's interesting. So let's look at it this way. It's very difficult to pursue growth in the midst of fiscal consolidation. It's very difficult. So on the average, it's a trade-off. And what you do as managers of the economy is to manage the delicate balance between fiscal consolidation objectives and then growth objectives. Because the idea is that in the immediate, fiscal consolidation measures would impose cost on the economy. and probably impose restrictions on the growth drivers of the economy in the immediate, right? So, and the sacrifice, when we say the cost, we can also interpret that to mean the sacrifice. The sacrifice will come from growth. So you can see that pre-pandemic, on the average, we're growing around 6.5% or in excess of 6%. With COVID, growth decelerated significantly to 0.4%. And we have been trending probably below 4%. Now, if you look at the 2024 budget and you also look at the medium-term outlook up to 2027, the growth that is forecast in there is just at around 2.8%. You see? So it tells you that from now to 2026 and maybe beyond, the fiscal consolidation measures will have a bite on growth. On growth. And that is why the preoccupation now, and I agree with the minister, the preoccupation now is to restore macroeconomic stability. And that will come at a price. And the part of the price will be that you may not be able to have growth that will be sufficient to lift millions of Ghanaians out of poverty and narrow the inequality. So growth, even for 2024, is 2.8%. And I believe that that growth is very uninspiring. Okay. That growth does not inspire hope. That growth will not create the much needed jobs that we crave for, especially in the formal wage economy. Again, that growth will not be sufficient to satisfy the growing appetite for higher income, higher consumption, and all of that. So baseline, that is the price we have to pay. And it is my considered view, I've said this before, that the IMF inspired growth projections until 2026 is quite insufficient. And probably I want to lean to a statement that the president made, I think a couple of months ago, that the IMF supported program is not the panacea to all our problems. And the president was right, because the IMF supported program cannot and will not solve all our problems. So I'm actually looking forward to the full budget statement to see what additional measures, growth enhancing measures, that government is hoping to implement to complement the IMF supported program. Other than that, we would have done the diagnosis that the IMF supported program is not a panacea to all our problems, but then we would have failed to respond in complementing that. And the IMF itself is not ignorant of that their program won't solve all our problems. It has never solved all our problems, and it will not. And this will not be the first time it will solve all our problems. So what we need to do is, how do we complement that? As I said, we may not be able to pass objective judgments on the 2024 budget now, because all that we have now is the budget highlight. The full budget is not available. Once it is available, together with appendices and all of that, we are able to discern the future from there.
All right. So, Prof, in essence, it's too early days yet to celebrate Nkunim.
No. I think, there is this thing we do in Ghana that sometimes creates the impression that there is a gap between the managers of the economy and the real economy on the ground. Okay. And I think that is unfortunate. Perhaps the economy, we can have the economy at different level. Your economy may be different from mine. Is that okay? It may be different from somebody else's own. It's the same thing. We can look at it in terms of inflation. Okay. Your inflation may be different from mine. Okay. My inflation will be different from other listeners on this call. Even without even you telling me what your inflation rate is. Let's go to the Ghana Statistical Service. Okay. When you look at October inflation, we are told that inflation decelerated to or came down to 35.2% October from 38.1% in September. But that is the national average. When you look at the regional differences, you will see that inflation is very high in some regions compared to other regions. A good example is to look at food inflation. We are told that food inflation has come down from 49% to 44% October,
Yeah.
right? So what that tells you is that from October last year to October this year, food prices on the average have gone up by 44%.
Wow.
Is that not too much for the average Ghanaian to bear?
Extremely high.
Yeah, from just October last year to October this year, food prices have gone up on the average by 44%. But what is even more interesting is the marginality. And what do I mean by that? As we speak right now, food inflation in the eastern region is more than 65%. Can you imagine? Food inflation in the northeast of Ghana is more than 60%. So you will see that we are still talking about food inflation on the average of 44%, but depending on where you are eating this morning, depending on where you've been eating the past 1 year, from October last year to date, your food price will be higher than where some other people are. As we speak right now, where you and I are connecting in Greater Accra, food inflation is more than 40%. Okay, and it's lower in some places, including Central Region, compared to other regions. So typically, if you are still talking about inflation of 35.2%, it's still very high by world average. And in fact, in Sub-Saharan Africa, Ghana is one of the few countries, probably together with Sierra Leone, another 3 countries have such higher inflation. Of course, when compared to Zimbabwe, it may look like we have done excellently, but Zimbabwe's inflation is not a benchmark.
That's an extreme comparison.
Yes.
Extreme analysis.
In economics, we say that is an outlier, right?
Yeah.
So of course, we've made some progress. That said, as a country, we've made some progress. We've seen some recovery. We've seen some relative stability. We have not turned the corner totally.
Yeah.
We are not there yet, but we must also recognize the little progress that we've made, and then so that would also inspire us to build on it and consolidate that. Even the relative stability that we have seen, there are headwinds, there are risks ahead, which perhaps if those risks should crystallize, especially the downside risk, in terms of the headwinds, all the gains that we have made so far could easily be derailed. With that in mind, we could not say that we have totally turned the corner because it's so much contingent. For instance, I'll give you an example. We are still waiting for the successful review of our first indicative target under the IMF supported program.
Sure.
We've passed the staff level agreement. We've had the staff level agreement. That is good news, but that is not the end, right? It's just a means to an end. What is the end? The end is that we'll get board approval and then get the $600 million. As we speak right now, board approval hasn't come simply because the IMF knows very well that if they should go ahead and approve the review and they release the $600 million, it will not be sufficient to close the dollar deficit gap or the dollar deficit in the economy, and therefore the cedi is likely to come under cumulative pressure. So they are hoping that we can clear a major hurdle when it comes to external debt restructuring. And why is that so? Because the IMF knows that the program they have approved with their name on it, they are only providing $3 billion in terms of the financing gap in balance of payment terms. They're only providing $3 billion out of the $15 billion they have estimated as the financing gap. So what it means is that the financing requirement to translate the IMF program into actual is actually beyond them. And that is why they are tying the progress we made with external debt restructuring to IMF board approval. Other than that, the program can only achieve limited effectiveness. So yes, we've made some progress. Again, let's look at the data. If you look at from the beginning of the year to end of September, cumulatively, the cedi had depreciated by more than 20% across the major trading currencies. Of course, we can say that the bulk of that depreciation, we saw it in the first 2 months or so of this year. And since the program was approved on May 17th to date, at least we've seen relative stability. Of course, we can identify with that also, because in economics, stable price is not the same as same price over time, right?
Okay.
So we are still seeing some depreciation, all right, but we can still consider that to be stable, because the change is not so significant to alter the economic decisions of agents.
Okay.
So, in conclusion on your question, whether this is an Nkunim budget, for now, based on the budget highlights, the broad framework that we know also from the IMF program, we can give government the benefit of the doubt, because we don't have the full budget now.
Yeah.
But I don't think we are there yet. But I'm looking forward to something.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to something, because there could be some 1 or 2 surprises in the main budget statement.
All right.
Based on also the reaction so far. The reason I'm saying that I'm looking forward to something is that I believe that it is not lost on the Minister of Finance that this could be his last full year budget.
Yeah.
And therefore, and also for the president.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to some changes or interventions that will cause us to remember them when they are no more in office. I'm looking forward to that. And that is not really in terms of distributing cash to Ghanaians, in terms of helicopter dropping of money. No. But I'm looking at a statement, an intervention that will bear fruit beyond their tenure, will bear fruit beyond 2024 and all of that. So I will hold my brief here and look forward to the full budget. And then we'll be able to see, other than that, if all that we have here in terms of the budget highlights and the details is what we can get from the full budget, then I think that is not inspiring enough. In fact, it's lying so flat. And part of why it's lying flat and uninspiring is that we have a fair idea from the IMF supported program, the outlook onto 2026 and even beyond.
All right, Prof. So let's move on to the 2024 medium-term overall macroeconomic targets. Now, government projects 2.8% GDP growth, non-oil real GDP growth of at least 2.1%, end period inflation of 15%, primary balance on commitment basis of a surplus of 0.5% of GDP, and gross international reserve to cover not less than 3 months import cover. Prof, having in mind that this government came back this year to revise their own targets, do you foresee these targets being achieved?
I think that this is quite moderate.
Modest. All right.
Yeah, compared to what they gave us a year ago. A year ago, you could see clearly they were overly ambitious, which may also be as a result of probably being too anxious to deliver, and which also highlighted a big disconnect between the reality and what they were managing. Right. So they were surprised.
So could that have informed them to be quite a little bit modest on this one? Could that
I believe that you are right. They learned a lesson from that, and also because with this one we have the IMF supported program, which has outlined the broad macro framework, fiscal, monetary until 2026, and therefore government wouldn't want to deviate substantially from that. You could see that in the media review of the 2023 budget, when government projected to grow the economy by 2.8% or so, they revised it to 1.5%. That 1.5% is what is in the IMF supported program. But as you can see, it is likely based on the growth trajectory for the first 2 quarters, it's likely we may do more than the 1.5%,
Absolutely.
which is in the IMF program. But I think for purposes of consolidating investor confidence in our economy, they didn't want to come out with projection that deviates substantially from the IMF supported program. Yeah. But when it comes to inflation, it had been our considered view that inflation may come down to about 18%, right? This was our own forecast a month ago, but government is looking at 15%, and then the others. But look at it this way: next year is a different year. Under normal circumstance, if it hadn't been an election year, we could put a lot of premium on government projections. But given that it's an election year, our own
Let's go. Prof, I think you are muted.
Is it better now?
Okay. Yes, now I think you are back online. Yes.
There's some level of risk, which has to do with
Prof,
also the election.
Go back a little bit? Could you go back about one? We lost you there, so if you could start a bit of yes.
Yes. Okay. I was saying that the projections are quite moderate.
Yes.
If you look at where inflation is now, 35.2%. Government revised inflation target for 2023 is 31.3%. That looks achievable. Okay. And then if we're able to continue on this path of fiscal discipline consolidation, then between at least we could be getting closer to the 15%. Okay. A month ago, we were looking at headline inflation 2024 for around 18%, with a variance which will take it to about 22 or so percent. But given that next year is an election year, history tells us that we tend to accommodate a large variance in all the competitive elections that we've had. And here we are talking about the year 2000, 2008, 2012, 2016, and 2020. There are few exceptions, which has to do with 2004. And also, because 2004, we were under, we had a HAPEC relief, and then also looking forward to the multilateral debt relief initiative. Now, the 2004 election also wasn't that competitive, because the outcome was largely predictable that the President Kufuor was going to have a second term. When it happens that way, when the outcome is largely predictable, then politicians don't overspend to win over the electorate. And the incumbent also doesn't overspend to win over the electorate. So we are able to keep to the fiscal discipline, the target, and all of that to a large extent. But in all the competitive election years that we've had, we are unable to achieve the target that we've set for ourselves. In fact, and sometimes the variance, per GDP has been more than 2%. So fiscal deficit, you will see the variance between the target and the actual is very wide. Across 2000, 2008, 2012, 2016, 2020. Then again, when it comes to inflation, you will see that the actual tends to be higher than the target. Just like fiscal deficit. And then again, when it comes to GDP growth, you also see the same thing. So given the outlook for 2024 between the two major political parties, there's real risk that we may not be able to keep to the assumptions underlining the 2024 budget. And in the first half, we are likely to be on track. Typically, what happens in Ghana is that in all the competitive election years, you will see that the last 4 months of that election year, nobody manages anything. We don't even track budget performance. We don't, and all of that. So ministers, MCEs, DCEs, government officials, MPs, everybody is after votes. And once we take our eyes off the fiscal dashboard, then government tends to embark on all kinds of, then the pressure mounts on the Minister of Finance to open the floodgates so that, because the point is that when it gets to the crucial point, maybe towards the end of October, thereabout, when the projections looks that the government is going to lose, they will make a decision whether to keep to fiscal discipline or to look at their own interest, which is winning the election.
Prof, the question there would be, at what risk? And do the government do have the leverage this time round? Because we have the international market closed. We
Yes.
don't have the fiscal space to even generate our own revenue. We'll come to the revenue targets anyway for 2024. Would they go gung ho this time around, knowing that the risks are quite dire coming from a DDP project? Would this government want to risk all that at the expense of breaking the 8?
They will. If it comes to breaking the 8, nothing will stop them. If they are allowed, nothing will stop them. They will. Our politicians don't love this country above their own interest. Across the two main political parties. So nobody should sleep thinking that the average politician goes to bed thinking about them. No. Not at all. Because in 2016, we were still under an IMF-supported program. In fact, the 16th IMF-supported program kicked in from April 3rd, 2015 to April 2019. So 2016, we were under an IMF program, but we accommodated fiscal slippages. In fact, the first year progress that Ghana made under the 16th IMF-supported program was effectively reversed in the 2016 election. So what happened was that when we were done with the 2016 election, the program was completely off. To bring it back, we needed to ask for extension. So we had to ask for extension with the 2016 IMF supported program in order to fulfill righteousness, not all righteousness, because they had to give us some waivers and other things in order for us to exit the program on a good note, which was like a marriage of convenience. Good for the IMF, good for us also, because that 16th IMF supported program did not deliver on one key program objective, which was debt sustainability. So if you check the 16th IMF supported program, one of the objectives was to restore debt sustainability by the end of the program. Meanwhile, we finished the program with debt unsustainability. So Ghana officially entered a high risk of debt distress category in 2014. In 2014. And we exited the IMF supported program in April 2019, still being classified as a high risk of debt distress country, as a medium debt carrying country. Yeah, we're still classified as a high risk of debt distress country. And then from there, we migrated deeper into debt distress, which occasioned the 17th IMF supported program. So we've done it before. We've done it before.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say. In other words, we have a history.
Yeah, we have the history. It's not so difficult. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
Under the 17th IMF supported program, one of the expenditure rationalization savings was supposed to come from CAPEX. We are supposed to rationalize CAPEX and make some savings of about 0.9% of GDP. And then limit wage increases, including hiring. And that was also supposed to rake in about 0.5% of GDP in terms of fiscal savings, right? But look at what we have done in 2024. Look at the agreement government reached, the tripartite committee on minimum wage, on base pay increase. Okay? So is that consistent with the IMF broad framework?
No.
You see the point? Okay, so already the election effect is beginning to show in how government responds to agitations. Okay, and therefore, and we all know, organized labor, all of us, we all know that in an election year, government is vulnerable. And therefore, with the little pressing, we are likely to get what we want. And in that process, we then undermine the economic fundamentals. So if government could accommodate this base pay adjustment, and we are told that the second component that will kick in from July or so, then that tells you that they will know how to work around IMF supported program. Okay. Yeah. And also when the new government came into power in 2017, even though we had an IMF program, they were still able to accommodate some of their socially desirable programs that were expensively arranged and inefficiently implemented, including planting for food and jobs and the rest of them. Right? They still had their way.
All right, Prof. So the question one is asked. Some are asking is, what does a 1 trillion cedi economy mean? What is the significance?
Under normal circumstance, when you cross such a base drift, should cause a celebration to some extent. Okay. We celebrate significant milestones in our lives. People celebrate age so and so at 25, so and so at 50, so and so at 70. People celebrate it. Nations celebrate that as well. So to the extent that by the end of 2024, we are looking at transitioning into the trillions, under normal circumstance is something we should look forward to. But the question is, how does that reflect in the pocket of the ordinary Ghanaian?
All right.
How much of that is associated with the guy on the street? Okay, so in the last 30 years or so, in fact, under the Fourth Republic since 1992, we have seen growth. We have seen positive growth, but that growth hasn't been sufficient. The growth hasn't been inclusive. We've seen growth driven also by price. Real growth has not been that inclusive. And therefore, we've seen the economy growing, but we've also seen inequality widening. The gap between the haves and the have-nots keep widening. In last year alone, the World Bank told us that inflation inspired poverty, right? Translated more than 800,000 Ghanaians into poverty safely because of inflation. So the question is, in the midst of all these statistics, do you celebrate a 1 trillion economy? That is the issue. And I believe that should inform our conversation going forward. How do we engineer inclusive growth? How do we engineer job-rich growth? How do we also improve the redistribution of that growth process? How do we increase local content in that growth process? Because that 1 trillion economy we'll be talking about towards the end of next year might have benefited foreigners more than Ghanaians. So perhaps foreigners, foreign investors, others can identify more with that GDP growth, with that GDP, than maybe the ordinary Ghanaian. And I believe that should inform our conversation going forward. How do we engineer inclusive growth? How do we ensure growth that will rope in the low and moderate income earners? How do we also improve the redistribution of the growth aggressively, rather than just relying on the traditional trickle-down effect in economics? Because we know that trickle-down effect is not happening in Ghana and a lot of other African countries.
So, Prof, thanks a lot. The question is, with the advent of AI and the talk of the government initially saying that, look, they're going to focus on skills development. You did allude to the fact that probably there's growth, but then it is happening in sectors way out of places where people will ordinarily benefit. What do you think, in the light of where we are going, the global geopolitics and all the things that we're going on, how do we position ourselves to take advantage and ensure there's an inclusive growth in the economy? What can we do, in essence?
Precisely. Great. And I believe that, in fact, you've brought a very important concept. Let's go to, let's say, Econs 101. When we think about factors of production, merely being alive is not sufficient to be counted.
Yes.
So when we talk about factors of production, we talk about labor, not human beings.
Yeah.
Even with labor, we've moved beyond labor. We are talking about skilled labor.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, now we are talking about somebody, a skilled labor who is digitally savvy.
Yes.
So as we go deeper into the fourth industrial revolution, the dynamics, the job creation potential, the skill requirement, the reskilling, the upscaling, and all of that will change. And that is why we have to prepare our own people towards that. Already, government has started some initiatives in the area of digitization. But I believe that we don't have a nationally driven, inclusive digitization policy that integrates digitization in a normal way of life. I'll give you an example. You know, some of us disagreed with government implementation of STEM
Mm-hmm.
in the senior high school stage, right?
Yeah.
What is the point in building new STEM schools all over when you could integrate them in the traditional senior high schools?
Yeah.
Why not infuse that in the educational system? Why not have why not retool, reskill those in Presec, Achimota, Wesley Girls? Because we have the structures. Do you get a point?
Yes, we do.
Why go and build a new STEM school all over the place in some places? Because digitization is not a standalone. As we speak right now, we are talking about digitization in economics. So we talk about digital economics. We are talking about digital finance. We are talking about digital engineering. We are talking about digitalization in every sphere of life. Digitization in agriculture, digitization in agribusiness, digitization in agro-processing, digitization. So that is how we are looking at it. So our national orientation must reflect the dynamics, that we are not leaving anyone behind. And unfortunately, I think that government got it wrong with the way they are implementing the STEM. We need to integrate them, infuse them within the traditional senior high schools. Let's make sure that the labs, okay, in all the schools are renovated, are stocked with appropriate digital gadgets and the rest of them. That is the way to go. Go to our senior high schools and see those doing science. Go to the labs. Okay, there's nothing in there. Go to Wesley Girls, examine their lab. Go to Presec, go to Infantipim, go to Yasantua Senior High School. Go all over the place. And then, so once you do it that way, it doesn't matter. The person doesn't have to go to a standalone STEM school to be digitally relevant. No. Let's infuse it. Let's integrate it as a way of life now. What it also means is that digitization will replace some jobs. It will bring disruptions. New jobs will emerge. So we need to align Ghanaians. The skilled labor must be geared towards that. And I believe that that those are the areas that we need to make progress. I believe in that. It's simply because of this.
So
the future. Yes.
Again, talking about the inclusive growth. So government passed some tax reliefs, zero rated on locally manufactured African prints for 2 more years, with import duties on import of electric vehicles, for instance, with import duties on semi-knockdown and completed knockdown electric vehicles, extend zero rate of VAT to locally assembled vehicles. Are these the kind of things that would really endanger inclusive growth? Are these the kind of things that really will, help us?
No.
All right.
No. Some of the tax reliefs you mentioned, they are already embedded in the system. So they are not new. Some are just extension. So the system has incorporated that. Okay, there are few
so
new
the question
ones.
was, what would then be a more reliable way of tax reliefs, or a more reliable way of endangering inclusive growth in the industrial sector, for instance?
Okay, so that's an important question. One, let's look at the tax environment.
Yes.
does our tax environment overall enable the competitiveness of the private sector moving towards economic transformation and inclusive productivity growth? The answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
We are not saying this because we are academics. I don't run a business.
Yeah.
But I don't need to run a business to understand how a business can be collapsed.
All right.
Right. But again, let's listen to the captains of industry across AGI, Private Enterprise Federation, okay, Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Agribusiness Forum, and the rest of them. You check their opinion over the years. You could see the adversarial tax policies that is inhibiting private sector competitiveness. It's all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Now, then look at interest rates.
Yeah.
Look at the huge infrastructure deficits. If there is a firm in Accra that has to access raw material in the central region, you can imagine how uncompetitive they will be. The hours they will spend in traffic. If you put all of these things together, the restrictions on the growth drivers of the economy, where we can have job-rich growth, is very, very high. And I think, and that is why we had said this long ago. And I'm looking forward to the main budget, the full budget.
Yeah.
We had proposed that it is about time the country merges the standard VAT rate of 15% with the straight levies and peg it at below 18%. That will be enabling. Again, there are other taxes. When you look at the Growth and Sustainability Act, we need to take another look. You know, you cannot tax your way out of poverty. In the name of macroeconomic stability, the state cannot secure its comfort financially at the expense of households and private sector.
I think we've lost Prof there. If you are listening to us, this is Graphic Business. We're coming from Graphic Business Studios at number 3 Graphic Road. Whilst we wait for Prof to rejoin us, we will give opportunity for others to ask questions when the time comes. We are discussing currently the 2024 budget statement and what are its implications for all of us. As you are aware, the Minister of Finance laid the Parliament, which may be its last full year budget presentation to Parliament yesterday. And so Prof is bringing us to speed. What are some of the implications on? If you have questions, please, you can raise your hand using the tools underneath your Twitter handles, and then we'll let you. You can also test your questions on the icons below the Twitter Spaces. That is and then we can pick your questions from Prof to answer.
Okay, hello, I'm back now.
Prof, go ahead, please.
Yes, I was saying that the state, in its effort to restore financial health, must not come at a great cost to households and private sector. Unfortunately, that is what Ghana is doing. But we must know that the strength of the state ultimately is linked to the strength of the balance sheet of households and private sector. So in our attempt to restore macroeconomic stability, if we are not careful, we may have that in the short term, but in the long term, we may be undermining the competitiveness of our private sector. And already the signs are very clear. Let's go back to the first 2 quarters of this year, the GDP growth. Okay? You will see that even though growth for the first 2 quarters actually exceeded expectation, let's look at the growth drivers in there. Agriculture and then service. These are the 2 subsectors contributing to that growth. And when it comes to agriculture, we are looking at crops and livestock. That subsector, does it recruit sufficiently? The answer is no.
Okay.
The other sector that is contributing that growth is service. If you open it up, you will see ICT, information communication growth from that side. Is that sector, subsector also labor intensive? The answer is no. Then when it comes to industry, the only subsector within industry that is recording positive growth is mining and quarrying. The question is, mining and quarrying, are they job intensive subsectors? The answer is no. In fact, if you look at the data from 2012 or so, 2012 or 2013 to 2020, thereabout, nearly 20% of Ghana GDP growth, according to the World Bank, is driven by mining. Nearly 20%. Meanwhile, within that period, that sector actually did not offer job creation. And that is why we are saying that we have celebrated jobless growth in the last couple of years. And probably it's about time we turn the leaf. So when we are turning the corner, let's turn the corner to the sector, to the subsectors that would engineer job-rich growth. So industry really is not doing well. So that also tells you that the taxes, the high interest rates, the restrictions on the growth drivers of the economy are having higher impact on that particular sector, and therefore we are not seeing growth. In fact, manufacturing has been recording negative growth for some time now. If you look at Bank of Ghana's own composite index of economic activity, they have not turned the corner. They've not turned the corner because the composite index of economic activity is still contracting, except that it's contracting at a slower pace now. Again, if you look at where the policy rate is, government itself is borrowing averagely 31, 32%. The Ghana reference rate is 33%. What business can you do such that your margins will be more than 32%? And that is just to satisfy one business input cost, finance. How about labor input cost? How about fiscal input cost, digitization, and the rest of them? So we have created a certain environment that does not offer that kind of enabling environment sort of to guarantee private sector competitiveness as we move towards economic transformation and inclusive productivity growth. And that is worrying. That is worrying.
Thank you very much, Prof. We will continue our conversations. Just to announce to our listeners that please, if you want to ask a question, you can request to speak, and we'll give you the opportunity to ask Professor a question. Prof has generously given his time to educate us on the budget statement. We are also coming to you from the Graphic Business Studios in number 3 Graphic Road, Accra. Please, Prof. Now, my next topic is my next issue I want to ask is this: has the investment government made in this planting for food and jobs and one district, one factory, has it in any way deliver on what we expected to do? And what can we do if we haven't been able to do it well to enhance it?
Okay, thank you very much. That is an important question. We sometimes say that when you are strong or when you have built resilience, the only way we can tell is when shocks of the magnitude we have seen in the last 3 years emerge. So the resilience of our economic policy, the economy, was actually tested. The way we had evaluated some of these socially desirable interventions had to do more with propaganda. Okay. But then when COVID came, propaganda took its rightful place behind the back. And then the reality evaluated the efficacy of these policies. So to the extent that the global supply chain was intact, we were getting food supplement from Burkina Faso, Niger, and outside our region. Planting for food and jobs, 8 nakedness was covered. But then when COVID came with the disruptions to the global supply chain and all of that, we were exposed. So you could see, truly, If planting for food and jobs had worked, we would have seen it in the crisis moment. We would have seen the food buffer. We would have seen the strength and the efficiency with which we implemented the planting for food and jobs. The results, in fact, government didn't have to talk because the results will show. The results will show, right? Just like the way Bible tells us, right, that everybody's work will be tested by fire. It will be revealed whether you built with rubber, straw, or whatever, or gold or precious, whatever. So it's during trying times when shocks like this happen that you're able to tell the resilience of your policies and the rest of them. And Ghana collapsed in the midst of those shocks. Essentially, that's what happened. So the question somebody would ask is, planting for food and jobs, where is the food? Where are the jobs?
And why is
Ghana's,
inflation so high?
yeah,
And why
and
is
in fact,
food inflation
yeah,
so high?
and our Ghana's food inflation is one of the highest
Yeah.
in the whole of Africa. And you get the real meaning. From the
Yes.
beginning of 2022, way up to somewhere August ending, our food inflation hasn't. Where was planting for food and jobs?
Mhm.
And the question is not that we didn't spend money. And this is Ghana's basic problem.
Yeah.
It wasn't that we didn't spend money, it's the efficiency, the inefficiency, the corruption.
Yeah.
So probably planting for food and jobs benefited few individuals than the common good.
Yeah.
It's not only in that sector. In fact, you see it in our road sector as well. If you look at Ghana's road stock, on paper, it's worth billions of dollars. Pick the national budget. Look at roads we have done, the amount and all of that. But when you go to the ground, to those places, you will not see those roads.
Yeah.
It's the corruption. Okay, so we have built roads in our stomachs than on the road that we will have to use. Okay, this
Yeah.
is what is explaining all the challenges we go through,
Yeah.
and that is why
Yeah.
the state keeps levying taxes on the citizens and private sector, and yet the state is not redistributing that resources efficiently and effectively to engineer inclusive growth. No,
Yeah.
Ghana is taxing its citizens like other Scandinavian countries, but in those countries, they are very efficient in the delivery of public services,
Yeah.
education, health, social protection, social spending. Yes, efficiently. But in Ghana, that is not the same. Look at what is happening in our.
Yeah. So if you're listening to us again, I think with Prof tripped off, you will join us again. Noah, I can see you want to ask a question. Let's hold on when Prof will join us, and then
Yes, I've joined now.
okay,
I've
Prof.
joined now.
So,
Yes.
Prof, there's Noah on the line. He wants to ask a question. Noah, please ask your question, and Prof can tie into what you were saying earlier.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Noah as usual. Prof, I want to ask you, why is it that we keep giving tax exemptions to companies who come and set up in this country, but the profit margin and dividends, we really cannot feel it? And based on that, a lot of Ghanaian companies are also asking for tax exemptions. Are we saying that the tax exemptions we give to private foreign companies are actually not giving us the dividend that it requires, or the Ghanaian companies are just making noise out of it? My second question is that I've gone to Nigeria and I've lived in Nigeria, and I've seen Unilever that left Ghana to do majority of their production in Nigeria. There is no light in Nigeria. Excuse me to say this. All apologies to my colleagues. There's no light in Nigeria. Guinness Ghana Limited is producing using generator, diesel generator, big ones. And Unilever is also doing the same thing. And they are always declaring profit. But when it comes to Ghana, they are not declaring profits. What is wrong? And what is going on? Thank you.
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Yes.
In the literature, tax exemptions, there's a place for tax exemptions. In other words, we can also say tax expenditures. But the question is, you have to deploy them appropriately. What we have seen in Ghana over the years, and it's also supported by external studies, also done by the IMF and the World Bank, that the way we are operationalizing our exemption regime is counterproductive. We are not granting exemptions appropriately. And then also the conditions that must be fulfilled for those exemptions, the state doesn't monitor them. And we don't track. That said, we have some irrational exemptions that are given. They are abused, for which reason we lose so much relative to how much we get in terms of the gains from granting those exemptions. Sometimes it becomes in the form of job creation and the rest of them. But do we really track? Do we follow up? And even if we follow up with the job creations, what is the wage bill that those Ghanaians who are employed, what is the wage bill that they command? Apart from that, the other important thing is, really, do we need to grant exemptions to those companies to come? Because they will come anyway. Whether exemptions or not, they will come anyway. So it's not like a blanket check that as a country, we have to evaluate that and see where critically do we need to grant exemptions. Sometimes government may also grant exemptions as part of its own commitment in a joint venture arrangement or something, because they don't have the money. They will feel that, okay, then let's grant exemptions to cover this. Sometimes also is the abuse in those areas. But overall, I think we need to look at overall competitiveness of our business climate. Because sometimes it gets to a certain point, and whether you're a foreign company or you are a local company, you may not be able to undo the restrictions on the group drivers. We need to look at it. In fact, if we look at the manufacturing space across the big manufacturing companies and the rest of them, things have not gone well since the beginning of 2022. That's quite worrying for us as a country. The other bit that we also need to look at is to look at the unpredictability of Ghana's tax environment. Now the medium-term revenue strategy has been published. We are hoping that probably we can keep to that, because businesses, in order for them to plan for long-term, they need that stability and predictability in the tax environment, the fiscal environment, and the rest of them. Okay, so but we haven't had that. We haven't had that consistently, and therefore, in terms of value addition, manufacturing, the rest of them, we are not doing well. If we go back to the Ghana Beyond Aid document, which was published, I think, in 2018, you will see clear targets in terms of how much of our exports will be driven by manufactured products, how much of our GDP composition should be driven by value added, and the rest of them. Really, are we keeping to that? If we look at the coordinated program, economic and social program that the government published, and all the beautiful things that we have said in there, are we keeping to them? We don't. We don't. I think that would be my response. So the real issue is, it's not like we don't know the right thing to do.
Yeah.
The real issue is, do we do them? Sometimes we do the right things, but we are not consistent. Before you see that the progress will be broad-based and reflect, we must be consistent. We must do the right things consistently. When we identify the right thing to do, we have to do it in the right way, and we have to be consistent. We don't do it one-off and then maybe take several steps back and the rest of that. Look at what DDEP has done to Ghana. Okay, the gains we have made in the capital market in the last 30 years, we have practically reversed it.
Yeah.
We have practically reversed it.
Okay, Prof. So, just to contextualize your statement you made, former President Rawlings once said, our problem in Ghana is not knowing what to do, but in doing what we know we should do. On that note, I want to take you to go to the growth strategy in the budget statement. Government has aligned some growth strategy, which is mainly hinged on the Ghana Mutual Prosperity Dialogue. What is your understanding of the Ghana Mutual Prosperity Dialogue?
You know what? This is back to what we have been talking about. Please, let's take time and check this government economic policy as contained in the budget statement from 2017. You see, practically every budget comes with a different theme. Okay? This and this. And sometimes we are unable to even draw the link. We are unable, it's like, really, do we really have like a plan underlining what we are doing? To see how this fit into this, and this fit into this, and this fit into that? No. Okay, so at some point we spoke about youth stats.
Yeah.
As of so many. So in fact, so sometimes it's not even worth tracking them because you know we are not going to implement it. Mutual prosperity and this thing. Okay, what is the underlying strategy? What's the policy document?
Well, they said a permanent steering committee is meeting.
So yeah, because the point is
to set up and drive the collaboration for growth. Yes, they are setting up a
so they are now setting it up. What is the policy document? The policy intentions, the philosophy behind it, and all of that. How have we discussed that widely?
The implementation is supposed to increase interventions in our capacity to produce and deepen value chains, facilitate modern and storage facilities, and increase shelf life of products. I mean, just to give you an idea of what the thinking is.
Yes. So we've read all of that. Yeah. What is different from the statement you just read, from the statement that accompanied Youth Start?
Yeah.
And all the other interventions since 2017. At some point, we said we're creating 1,000 entrepreneurs in one of our budgets. How many have we created so far? Have we objectively evaluated those interventions to learn the lessons which would inform maybe the next intervention? It's like we just keep like maybe a catchy word, something, and then we just run with it. Maybe 6 months, 1 year, we abandon it. I'm sure if they had opportunity of presenting another full year budget next year, there will be something else. The question is, how does it reinforce the previous ones? In economics, we say that reforms, when they are bundled together, sequenced, reinforce each other, the impact is much more great. This is my problem. You check all the budget we have had since 2017. You will see different teams, and sometimes you are struggling to see the link between this year's own and last year's own. How does this year's own build on the strengths of the previous one and overcome the weaknesses of that one? Who is sitting down to see the synergies across all those interventions? Across agriculture, agribusiness, agro-processing, across education, ICT, and the rest of them. How are we integrating all of them? Are they born out of a certain national framework that informs the rolling out of specific activities, so that all put together, it builds a common feature we all can identify with? This is the problem. And I want to, you may want to know.
Yeah.
Okay. You may want to know that it is possible that this mutual prosperity we are talking about, we may not even have the time
to implement
it fully, and another budget will be due.
So government also talk about tourism and then trade and industry exports. Governments want to increase exports, non-traditional exports, to about a target of about 4.8 billion in 2024. How feasible is this, Doc? Prof?
Wonderful statement and targets. Please, how do we translate that into actual? When you see targets like this, and as presented in the budget, they are good intentions, and we are not substituting good intentions for accomplishment. What is the strategy to translate it into actual? I believe in tourism. In fact, there's a whole literature on tourism-led economic growth and development.
Yeah.
And in fact, the job creation potential of the tourism sector is very high. You know, the year of return and all of that. But really, if a country wants to build tourism-led economic growth, you start from the basics. You look at road network. Okay, check some of our road network to some of our tourist sites. If you want to go and visit Afajato, you know the stress you go through. You want to go to Kakum, I hope sometime to come that forest will be there. Galamsey will not undo it. Right? And then you're also looking at the hotel industry, the value chain, security, and all of that, right? Cleanliness. Okay, so there has to be a comprehensive strategy. But I believe that it's good that at least we recognize all of this, but don't be surprised. We've seen this from 2012, 2013, 14, 15. You can check. When you have time and you examine our strategies over the years, you will see that we have not disappointed ourselves at all in terms of good intentions. But the question is, how do we translate those good intentions into actual?
So, Prof, let me give you some statistics question you asked. The government says it has established the district entrepreneurship program, commercial program, and the Youth Start Green program over the past 1 year. And they've been developed and piloted successfully. Government has signed an MOU with 11 banks to support this initiative. So at least that by way of tracking of the Youth Start program you mentioned, government says something is being done.
Okay, so what is the results?
Initial stages yet. It's at the conception stage.
So how are we building on that in 2024?
That is the question we have to ask.
Okay, so I think that sometimes part of what we do is that we are unable to have a strategy and follow through to its logical conclusion.
Agreed.
We truncate them in the middle, bring something else, especially when there's a regime change, a different government comes with a whole new set of things. Sometimes the initial cost of starting a program like You Start can be very high. So if you don't implement it to its logical conclusion, you don't get the maximum benefit from that intervention. Meanwhile, monies would have been sunk in there.
That's true.
And I think we don't have money. Not because resources are limited. Resources are limited, but they are scarce resources. So given that we don't have money, whatever intervention we are putting in place, let's think through it carefully. That will be able to implement it to its logical conclusion with a desired level of efficiency so that we can get the maximum gain from it. Then we're also looking at the linkages. How does it link up to other critical sectors of the economy? How does it link up to agriculture and agribusiness? How does it link up to this and that and all of that? That way, we realize that everybody then begins to fit in and the rest of them. Otherwise, some of these things, the performance has been suboptimal.
Thank you very much, Prof. At this juncture, may I now open the floor for questions. Please, if you wish to speak, request to speak, and we'll give you the opportunity to speak. Is there anybody who wants to ask a question? Kosi Jokoto, is there a question you want to ask? CBO Charles Benino Kain, do you have some questions? Emmanuel Bruce, anybody out there who wants to ask Prof questions? Yes. Yeah. Any questions? Prof is on standby for you. Prof, so what, in your view, should we be doing? The question is, what, in your view, what are some of the solutions should we be doing, bearing the fact that we don't have the detailed budget yet? What are some of the top of mind things that you can propose to government going forward?
Okay, great. My father was a farmer, a cocoa farmer. I believe in agriculture, but more importantly, I believed in linking that to agribusiness and agri-processing. This should be an important strategic pillar. Not just by highlighting it in words, but backing it with the necessary budgetary allocation and the level of efficiency it requires, so that this will bring food inflation down drastically. The starting point in solving our problem is to look at it through agribusiness, agro-processing. To have that, you also link that to agriculture. You will be linking it to industrialization. And you will see the job creation potential along that path as you move more towards agribusiness and agri-processing. Within that, it also offers us a leverage, right? It offers us a leverage within the African continental free trade to tap into Africa's food deficit. It's huge. In 2015, Africa's food deficit was $35 billion. Our net food import was $35 billion. This is projected to reach $110 billion conservatively by 2025, just a year or so down the line. So it means that if we're able to transform our agriculture and agribusiness and agro-processing, we have a huge market within Africa. So assuming we are able to reduce this by 10% or even 20% on an annual basis, that is huge. How many companies in Ghana are able to make sales of $1 billion?
Not many.
How many? Okay, so there's market. Beyond even Ghana, once you solve your food inflation, there's a huge market for exports. And these are low-hanging fruit. In fact, to be very honest with you, instead of assembling cars in Ghana, I would prefer that we put almost all the money in this area and make sure that we're able to raise maybe some 5 or 10 companies that will be able to export agro-processing, right, into the African market. It's huge. We are not even talking about the European market or North America. It's huge. Look, do you know something? The future of food is very high in Africa because it's the continent that spends almost 44% of household expenditure is on food. Between 42 and 44% of household expenditure in Africa is on food. It's also considered a young continent. So, for instance, the average age. Hello?
Yes, we are here, Doc.
For instance, the average age in Niger is around 15 years. Niger, that's their average age. Ghana's population by 2040 will be 45 million. 58% of that population will be less than 30 years. That is the age that eats a lot. Okay, so there are more hungry mouths to be fed, and by so doing, we create wealth. Focus on that. You link that to agriculture, even in terms of providing raw materials. In fact, there are some of our companies in Ghana, if they want to source raw material from the local environment, they cannot. We are unable to meet the capacity. We are unable to meet the capacity. And to link agriculture, agribusiness, then to greater industrialization, you are looking at your road network.
Okay.
You are looking at your road network that facilitate movement. Remember, economic activity is also about movement. Movement of labor, capital is important. So we have to design a system that does not hinder movement. Why should somebody spend like 8 hours just to go to Cape Coast and deliver a speed for 40 minutes? Why should I spend 8 hours in traffic, in and out, just to go and speak for 30 minutes in Cape Coast? Is that worth it? It's not worth it. You cannot design a system like this and expect growth to suddenly show up. Where will it come from? From heaven? Those days are gone.
So, Prof.
And then also, before I finish, the other bit we also need to look at is to look at export of skilled labor.
Okay.
Right? Especially in the health sector. Okay. And then, so we need to invest appropriately in our education as we highlight STEM and make sure that we are able to train people with the requisite skill and let's export them. In any way, they are going willingly, right? So let's have a system in place. Okay, if you look at West Africa, the health needs, there's a huge market. So let's invest, expand. Let's not waste the human resources. Because Ghanaians are very, very intelligent. Let's add value. We can export labor. We will get some dividend from there. Okay? Right now, if you go to the embassies, you will see so many Ghanaians there. And then in the evening, you will see them at the airport leaving.
Okay. Prof, Kosi, you say you want to ask a question. Please request to speak, and then we'll grant you access, please. Kosi. But Prof, I mean, before we go, finally, we cannot talk about the budget without looking at our current debt restructuring efforts, right? Government
Yes,
says
yes,
it anticipates that our debt to GDP ratio should hit 55% by 2028. Now,
yes.
earlier you did allude to the fact that the creditor committee
Hello?
has still not come through. Hello, hello, is that Kosi?
Hello?
Oh, Charles. Hello, Charles. Okay, okay. Uh-huh. Prof, so my question is this. We cannot conclude this discussion without looking at uh, their debt restructuring efforts. We are looking at a 55% debt to GDP by 2028. Now, we are not too clear on the indicative deadlines for the credit card committee to give us the approval. Will that not have an impact, or will that not create speculation where the speculators will go to town as we see the run on the CD last
Mhm.
year?
Yes, you are right. In fact, the minister recognizes that as well. In the
Mm,
budget highlights, there is an admission that we need to make progress with the restructuring of our external debt. That is fundamental, especially for the implementation of the IMF supported program. So you are right.
mm,
That's why earlier we said that there are headwinds.
yeah.
If we don't make the much needed progress with the restructuring of the external debt, chances are that the limited gains that we have made could easily be reversed, and there could be a run on the city. And that is why we are saying that we need to be very careful in how we celebrate victory. We need to be measured, because the point is that the official creditor committee that delivered financing assurance must now walk their talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Beyond
but
that,
here's the case. China is even having low growth itself, and China holds a bulk of our debt stock.
yes, just
And, and,
$1.9
and,
billion
and,
or
and
so. Yeah.
yes, reading through some literature, China, with regards to Zimbabwe, never really is not interested in debt forgiveness. At best, it's a matter of maturity. That is extended maturity.
Yes, we've seen that in other African countries recently. We've seen
Mm-hmm.
that with Chad, especially
Yeah.
with respect to Glencore, a
Yeah.
Swedish commodity trading company, right,
Mm.
that tied debt relief to world oil price. We've also seen what happened in the case of Zambia.
Zambia. Yeah.
In the case of Ghana, we should not expect total debt cancellation.
Mm-hmm.
Those days may have
Gone.
passed.
Okay.
So probably a combination of moratorium, reprofiling, and all of that should give us some breathing space. Okay, because ultimately the country is not a bankrupt country.
Mm.
Okay, a country that has gold and all those things. If you look at the wealth of this country, really you can't say the country is bankrupt. Probably we are having some temporary challenges.
Mm.
Probably we need some kind of breathing space to reorganize. That
Mm-hmm.
story may sell better than going to creditors and saying that take pen, cancel all that I owe you. That will be hard for them. Now, remember, those are also some people's taxpayers' money, right?
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
therefore, we cannot mismanage our affairs and expect some taxpayers to just taking up the bill. We
Mm.
have to be responsible, okay? But already we've made some gains. Let me
Give,
say that as we conclude, we've
give
made some
Charles.
gains. If restructuring that we've done, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
that alone confers a fiscal space of approximately 61 billion cedis on the
Mm-hmm.
government.
Yeah.
So if you see, that is why I'm saying that I'm waiting for the full budget
Yeah.
to see how government intends to utilize that fiscal space that has been created as a result of the domestic debt exchange. The hair they took from people's head How are we deploying them? Where are we replanting those heads? I am interested. Because if you see the gist that the minister gave us in the budget highlights, it tells you that they have scope now to do some kind of relief. And then also in terms of the balance of the primary balance arrangement, expenditure is contributing more, expenditure savings will contribute more relative to revenue. That tells you that they have some space conferred on them as a result of the domestic debt testing. You look at it this way: 2023, government budgeted to spend approximately 53 billion cedis on interest payment. With the domestic debt restructuring, where we have now reduced our weighted average interest cost from 21.2% end of 2022 to about 12%, that difference is a favorable gap at the disposal of the government. So we expect that in 2024, government will make less interest provision on our debt compared to 2023. And therefore, that space could be redeployed in other critical areas. So we should all be interested in how the plan government has in utilizing that huge fiscal space that has been created. Not to even talk about this additional fiscal space that will be conferred on the state with the completion of the external debt restructuring.
All right, Prof. I have two people on the line to ask you questions. Charles Benenokain and then Kosi Jokoto. Charles, please go ahead and ask your question. Followed by and then Kosi.
Okay, can I have a head?
Yes, I can hear you.
Am I on?
Yes, you're on. Go ahead.
Okay, so Doc, good morning and very insightful thoughts as always. If you look at the budget as it presented, when it comes to the tax side, you notice he premised his comments with the fact that tax GDP is around 13% in Ghana, which has to be increased to the continental average of between 18 and 20%. So it tells you that those tax reliefs that we're asking for is something that could not be done. What has been our challenge when we talk about widening tax nets, and yet on a yearly basis, we end up taxing those already in the tax net? What is our challenge in widening the tax net, as we've always understood?
Yes. Hello, my boss. I will say we are lazy. It's laziness. Part of it is laziness. You know where the bulk of that tax should have come from? The informal sector. That requires work. That requires GRA, that requires Ministry of Finance, that requires government to get to the ground, raise assessment, evaluate, and the rest of them. We don't want to do that hard work. What do we want to do? We want to rely on tax handles that the law will go out there and bring the tax and remit it to our offices. So we are relying more on indirect tax handles. If you look at the tax-paying population from the labor force estimation, we are looking at close to 14 million. Majority of that tax-paying population are probably in the informal sector. How do we get them? How do we rope them in? So those who are paying tax in terms of direct income tax, probably we are looking at maybe less than 3 million out of the estimated labor force of almost 14 million. So it means that we have a huge tax-paying population, mostly in the informal sector, who are not roped in. And because we are not putting the right strategies and the hard work to do that, we then tend to burden the faithful few who are already in the bracket by deepening the tax. This is what we are doing. The other bit also is that they're merely saying that you are raising your tax to GDP ratio to 18%, the rest of them. We want to be very careful how we interpret that, because the point is that you need to ask yourself, are you growing a taxable economy? If you are growing a taxable economy, then a percentage of that economy is a good proxy of how well you are doing in terms of tax revenue. But we are not growing a taxable economy. We are not. Because it is not every aspect of our GDP and its redistribution that is taxable. So all in the name of raising tax to GDP ratio, we just keep taxing and taxing and taxing. No. And let's also say this, please, Ghana's lack of development is not as a result of a low tax to GDP ratio. We can debate that, because you know why? Check the last 20 years. Check Ghana's tax to GDP ratio and compare that to Singapore and compare that to Malaysia. You will see that Malaysia, Singapore, they don't have exceptional tax to GDP ratio. So it tells you that even with the tax to GDP ratio that Ghana has collected over the years, if we're deploying them efficiently and effectively for the common good, this should not be the development outcome. If you have such a scenario, the advice cannot be collect more money. A sport child needs discipline, not more money. Ghana is becoming like a sport child.
Yeah.
And the way you deal with a sport child is not to empower him with more money. A combination of discipline and resources is important for Ghana.
Okay, Prof.
My final question.
Okay, Charles.
Can I do my final one?
Yeah. Please do. Then let Kosi speak before Prof answers.
Yes. So asking, we've also known about the fact that we have a leaking pot. Even when we collect more, there are leakages. Procurement system is so weak that even prices of or cost of projects are so inflated. At the end of the day, no matter how much we collect, it sinks. How can we address this procurement issue to ensure that even the little that we collect, we can be able to manage it in a way that will not, affect us negatively? Thank you.
So, Prof, before you answer
the point that you have made.
Prof, before you answer,
yes,
let's take Kosi's question too, so
okay,
you can speak
all
to
right.
both of them. Yes. Kosi, please go ahead. Kosi, please unmute yourself and speak, please. Mr. Jokoto. Hello. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay, now go ahead. Kosi, go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Clear, loud and clear.
Okay, all right. Prof, I want to, good morning once again, and good morning to all the participants. I want to situate my question about the next government. Given the debt exchange, we are yet to get the structure for the external one. But if you put the two together, most of these repayments will start with the next government. What do you think is going to be the difficulty for the next government? And as well as what preparation to the next government should be making, given all these scenarios?
Okay, thank you very much. I'll start from the first one. So the point that you made about procurement infractions is exactly the reason we are here, together with many other factors. We have turned the whole country into a procurement economy. So people can squeeze the margins to benefit them. Almost more than 70% of all big ticket procurement transactions in Ghana in the last 10 years or 12 years or so have been done on single or sole sourcing. What is the competitive nature of that? And now you will see that because our desire is not to serve the common good, we are turning up in the free senior high school space. Instead of empowering the schools to buy food stuff from the local market as a way of building the local economy, we have centralized that also through a procurement arrangement. And the more we do that, we're actually not allowing efficiency in that process. Ghana's problem, we have said it before, is a governance one. Is the governance failures that manifest explicitly in financial and economic mismanagement. So you are right. Let's solve the governance issues. Let's look at the procurement issues. Probably If we could deal with that, the little we've been able to collect will be.
Okay. Whilst we wait for Prof to reconnect, um, once again, we are coming to you from the studios of Graphic Business number 3, Graphic Road, and we are discussing the 2024 budget statement. I'm sure Prof will rejoin us soon once the connection is there. Yes, Mustafa, we get your question.
Otherwise, we may even tax the air that we breathe, and we'll still not have that development outcome. Efficiency. Let's deal with corruption aggressively. Look, conservative estimates exist that Ghana loses annually not less than $3 billion through corruption across central government, ministries, department, agencies, and state-owned enterprises annually, not less than $3 billion. That is more than what we are getting from the IMF over a 3-year period. To make matters simple for ourselves, you can just look at what we are doing to our forests through Galamsey, where the state today seems helpless, powerless in protecting itself and the resources God graciously has given to all of us. Then the next question, the next government. I'm not expecting a government from 2025 to begin to blame everything on what has happened. Any government that would emerge would actually come from the same system. So my understanding is that the political parties, as they prepare their manifesto, they should do so and contextualize their promises and what they hope to do within the challenges and the IMF supported program we have up to 2026. That should guide the level of promises. That should guide the kind of programs we want to introduce and the rest of them. Because whatever promises we have in the manifesto and all of that must reflect the current context. If you are designing a strategy, you do situational analysis. You also do external analysis. You do the situational analysis to identify the strengths and the weaknesses. You do the external analysis to identify the threats and opportunities. Then you can come out with a clear strategy and then resource reconfiguration that you need to do. So my understanding is that 2024 should not be fought on the basis of who has made more promises. It must reflect reality and a certain level of moderation that allows Ghanaians to see through who genuinely is coming for them. Because you cannot promise heaven only to get into power and say, I'll deliver hell because there's no money. There is full knowledge. If any political party needs more understanding of the impact of the domestic debt exchange and the IMF program, well, we can explain that to them so that they fully understand where the country is, the challenges we have now, the resource constraints, so that they think through. And how do we think out of the box? We must have a box. Then we can think out of it. That would be very important for me. So we know we don't have enough revenue. We are not going to get more than enough, but any government that will come to power must adopt a least cost approach to governance. Appoint not more than 40 ministers. Merge some ministries. You've got to be a bit ruthless because we are in a mess. To come out of it, it cannot be just business as usual. And that government must be willing to be unpopular in the short term so Ghanaians can appreciate what they are doing some time to come. So it's going to be challenging post-2024 for any government, but they must be prepared. And that is why we are looking for leaders who will think outside the box, who will put the common interest ahead of their own interests, who will be able to carry Ghanaians along, not through deception. We will see through it.
So there's a question from my colleague here, Suleiman Mustafa. His question is, how do you reconcile government statements of turning the corner when inflation is above 31% and base pay only up by 23% and government borrowing above 30%? How is that turning the corner? I think you have addressed this earlier on, but you can still answer him there.
Yes, precisely. All the variables, macro variables, should be speaking in the same direction. Then we can say we have turned the corner, right? So as it stands now, yes, we have seen uh, early signs of stability and all of that, but we are not there yet. So my considered view, is that we have not totally turned the corner. We also recognize that we've made some progress, some gains, and all of that. But for you to turn the corner, you are looking at improvement in those macroeconomic indicators broadening, right? So that we're able to discern a trend. Yeah, but as it stands now, we cannot say so. And the minister himself, in that same budget highlight, admits the headwinds when it comes to the restructuring of our external debt. So hopefully, if we are able to make progress and get the board approval by the end of this month, that will be very important for us, right? In terms of consolidating, building on those gains that we have made. But to say we have
Once again, if you're listening to us, we are discussing the 2024 budget statements. With us today is Professor Bokpin. Okay, Prof, welcome back.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
So I was saying that, yes, maybe there are several corners. We have turned some of them, but there are other corners to be turned. Yeah, so let's keep working hard. Let's not create the impression that we are out of the woods. Let's also not create the impression that we are not sympathizing with the pains Ghanaians are going through. Okay, because if we have turned a corner, everybody will see it. When the light is on, you don't need to tell people the light is on.
Yeah.
When light comes, darkness disappears automatically.
Yeah.
So when we've turned the corner, we will see it.
Yep.
In fact, we will see it ahead of government. In as much as we've seen some progress, we recognize that. But there's more that has to be done to broaden that economic recovery across the 16 regions, the district, and the rest of them. Marginality exists. To solve those ones, you don't need general policies. Some of them require specific interventions to address certain key issues. So we are on the road to recovery. It may be a little longer. Remember, it has been painful because the recovery we are seeing, some people paid a higher price. We are all paying some level of price through higher taxes and the rest of them. But in addition to higher taxes, some people have to take a haircut on their investment for Ghana to have a fresh start. Let's not take it for granted. We are getting some recovery on the back of the sweat of some innocent people. And people are still going to sacrifice through higher taxes. Let's wait for the full budget and see how government intends to increase revenue by more than 10 billion cedis. Let's see the tax handles they hope to deploy. Then we'll come back to this conversation again. But for now, we give them the benefit of the doubt.
Thank you so much, Prof, for your insightful and analytical statements on the 2024 budget, as always. Prof, we thank you. We are so grateful. Also, our listeners for joining us in. Next week, we'll come your way again. We'll analyze the budget, especially on impact of the budget on the SMEs, with another Dr. Andrea Yuku. Next week, Thursday, we'll be back again. We thank you all. But, Prof, as you did allude to, when the full detail of the budget is in again, we'll come back again, of course, to digest it again and to see which are the drivers that are going to take us to the needed destination that we all want to be. That is why we do these discussions. We do the discussions because we are a player in the market. And what happens to our readers and our listeners, we are part of it. So on behalf of Managing Director and everybody at Graphic Communications Group, I wish to thank you all for listening in. And please join us next week. Please also read the Graphic Business. Go to our graphicbusiness.com.gh/business. We have all the data analysis on the budget for you. Please also go to our News Plus app and subscribe to our News Plus apps, where you can have the digital version of newspapers. And please know that what we do is not just to write news, but we are documenting the history of this great country. On behalf of the Managing Director again and my own boss, the editor of Graphic itself, I wish to thank you all for joining us.